All right, so we'll begin with the Daily Nation, and this is what's on the front page of the Daily's Decision 2022. William Samoei Ruto confirmed the fifth president and incoming commander-in-chief of the Kenya Defense Forces. And quite a huge picture. Well, in a biting summary judgment, the Supreme Court dismisses Raila Odinga's petition and clears the way for William Samoei Ruto's swearing in as president in 7 days. Chief Justice Martha Kome's terse rebuke of Odinga's lawyers and confirmation of Ruto's victory completes what might seem a natural progression for the peasant child of Sugoi, but it might also be significant that he becomes only the second deputy president in Kenya to rise to the top seat. The first was his mentor, Daniel Arap Moi, who ascended to the presidency without contest in 1978 following the death in office of Jomo Kenyatta. So there's a whole page splash on page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 of the Daily Nation. I just want to begin, with Nurdin. I mean, I just want to get, your initial reaction to, what stood out for you in this judgment by the Supreme Court? What struck out for you?
Well, the fact that all 9 issues were dismissed. It showed that the evidence that was before the court was not persuasive enough. It didn't have the threshold that the court would use to nullify the election. And if you were following step by step, the moment they talked about the verification, tally, declaration was well done. For me, by then I was done with the judgment, because I knew whatever is coming down there won't change much. Right. So at the end of the day, as the judge said, there was a lot of hot air. They say the evidence that was brought was not sufficient enough, and the allegations that were made, he who alleges must prove. The allegations that were made were not proved beyond reasonable doubt, and so the notification was not possible. Yeah.
All right. So on the page, that's the second page of the Daily Nation. Raila petition failed on lack of evidence, falsified documents. The judges found the petition was to some extent based on falsehoods by some lawyers and falsified online. Well, the judges dismissed all the 9 grounds they had broadly framed as the issues for a determination in the election petitions filed by the Azimio leader Raila Odinga and 6 others. And also just joining me as well right now is Dr. Duncan Ojwang, who is a human rights advocate as well as the Dean, African Nazarene University School of Law. Will be telling us a little bit on what he feels stood out for him. Dr. How are you? Good morning. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Quite a historic moment.
It is.
It is. Tell me, I mean, what stood out for you?
I mean, don't you see it's almost what everything else that I don't know, for any user of court, there was no other way the court will have found differently. That is firstly. Yeah. And of course, left us with an egg on the face in terms of, for lawyers, cases are served through affidavit and oaths. So when you lie under oath, but even beside that, if they would not have gone to court, there would have been this window of maybe he really didn't win. But now taking him to court have given him even more legitimacy because they have taken him through the process and the crucibles, and having come out as declared to be duly elected, and court being not very happy with fabricated evidence is a clear indication that his win have gone through every possible review. And so it's a good place to be, I think. All
right. Arnold Maliba also joining us. A very good morning, public policy analyst. I also want to get, your initial reactions to the event yesterday.
I think, like I've said before, politicians have marketed the Supreme Court as part and parcel of the elections when it's not.
All right, Arnold, just hold on there. We will be sorting out your microphone in just a moment, so you cannot get your voice. But let me continue just a little bit on what was what is in the Daily Nation here, just much deeper. So the lack of evidence and forgery of documents is some of the reasons that moved the Supreme Court judges to unanimously dismiss the petitions challenging the election of William Ruto as president. The judges dismissing all the 9 grounds they had broadly framed as the issues for determination in the election petitions filed by the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party presidential candidate Raila Odinga, together with the 6 others. And with the verdict that Ruto, who polled 7.2 million or 50.49% of the total votes cast, was validly elected. Well, this paves the way for his swearing in as the country's 5th president next Tuesday. That's on the 13th of September. Well, just moving on, that's also a quick summary of what's on the 3rd page of the Daily Nation. Some of the harsh words the court used: hot air, wild goose chase. We had red herring. There's also perjury, which also came out quite strongly in that judgment. We also had outright forgeries and rapture. So these are some of those words that were strongly actually came out in that judgment. And of course, some have termed this a bit sort of harsh. But is it harsh, Nurdin?
Well, I think the court rather feels like the time was wasted. Rather annoyed. That is why the words that were used seem a little bit harsh. Yes, they might look harsh for those who have lost the case because they believe whatever they brought, courtesy of the lorry that we also, they felt that was enough for nullification. But the court, in pronouncing itself, is clearly more or less saying whatever you bring before us is what we make a judgment on. And what you brought was not sufficient. And that is why you see there are so many memes now on Twitter, courtesy of the lawyers who are represented as Azimio, sadly for them. But right. I do believe that most of them who are experiencing the banter are actually good advocates, just that they found themselves in the wrong place. But advocates at times, we also need to understand sometimes that, you know, in as much as you believe in a certain cause, because now you see the courts are talking about issues of perjury and forgery and reference in advocates. You see, that reference is not just by mistake. Right. It's more or less like a warning. So I believe moving forward, we need to make sure that whatever we bring before court is something that is actually worth the threshold of evidence, so that we can avoid taking political statements to court. Okay.
Arnold, your time now. I think we fixed your mic. So first initial reaction. Some would say, and I've had this, some sort of protest with regard to the language that was used in that judgment, with supporters of the Azimio team saying those words were somehow less pleasant.
Like I was saying just before, I discovered that somebody downstairs had decided that my microphone should not work. I'll actually check.
But we were not hacked, I must say.
I actually need to say this, that first of all, politicians have actually marketed the Supreme Court as part and parcel of the election process, which is not. Every time we are doing presidential elections, you hear a lot of the Supreme Court being spoken about as if it's part and parcel of the elections, which is wrong. So yesterday, whatever was coming out yesterday was not the election, as much as there was so much hope around it. And if you looked at the body language, I know because courts deal with law, evidence, and facts, things like body language might not be things to really discuss emphatically. But the thing is that the court felt so much of their time, like he said, wasted. Because one thing had already happened. IBC had already fallen victim to political games. And we actually had 2 sides. So the court was not going to allow itself to actually then also fall into similar games. And you see a number of things that had actually been in court. I think the court was very polite, because some of those statements and things that were put forth are what I normally call Majitu stories. There was so much, and just to look at how misinformation can actually work. Today, if you look at what was in the Supreme Court, I think you realize that fake news is actually has nothing to do, or rather has nothing on what was in court. So I think the court was actually very, very polite. Because you look at things like the overlays we saw, and you look at social media, because it was deriving it directly from the courts, and you will actually think, as in, is fiction even real? Because what we had, a lot of stuff we had actually made fiction look like it's actually child's play. Yeah.
All right.